welcome back. Yeah, I have to do my usual inquiry and influenced or approached by anyone trying to influence you in this case in the last 12 hours or so. All right, and assume that none of you tried to do any independent research into the facts and circumstances of this case. That's right. And no reading of news reports or watching the television reports of this trial. So, and I say it assuming that all of you know what you know about this case, or what you've heard from witness stands, and just acknowledge that all of the jurors have faithfully conducted themselves in the last 12 hours and are ready to go this morning. I do have something up front here, so bear with me for a minute.
By stipulation, we agree that this is not
You want me to read the stipulation jury instruction, or?
You're part of the medical records that
okay.
A small portion of those records that contain documents.
And these are going to be used during the direct examination? Okay.
All on the same page.
All of the entirety has been stipulated to. These are just extracts from the total bundle of records.
Process applies both sides.
Understood.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wagner was up on the stand yesterday, as you will recall. We suspended it a little after 5. We are going to call another witness at this time because another doctor needs to get back and find the patient. So Mr. Wagner will be back up after this particular witness, and Bertle, you may call that witness.
State calls Dr. Van Dinh.
Dr. Van Dinh.
Just stand right here for me. Raise your right hand. Face the clerk over here.
Yes, I do.
Okay, sir. Come on right around here.
Doctor, I'm going to ask you to just slide a little bit further forward because we're all going to have to hear you, so if you can speak to that microphone, we'd appreciate it. State your main inquiry.
Thank you. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Will you please tell us your full name and spell your last name?
My name is Nien Dinh. My last name is spelled D-I-N-H.
And also spell your first name for us.
D-I-E-N.
Thank you, doctor. Profession.
A psychiatrist.
And are you board certified in the practice of psychiatry?
Yes, I am. I'm board certified.
Are you a licensed physician here in the state of Florida?
Yes, I am.
How long have you been licensed to practice medicine, doctor?
I started my residency in 2011 and finished 4 years of residency and then 2 years here in the state of Florida. So 6 years total.
All right. And are you presently engaged in the practice of medicine?
Yes, I am the staff psychiatrist at Sarasota Hospital and Basin.
Okay. You told us a little bit about your residency, but would you tell the members of the jury your educational background starting in with your undergraduate years, please?
I attended Stony Brook University, major in mathematics, and went on and obtained my master's degree in mathematics at Brooklyn College. I became a teacher and taught for roughly a total of 10 years between here and there, and decided to go back to school. I attended and graduated from Ross University as a Caribbean medical school, and applied for residency here in the United States and got in to my training at West Virginia University for 4 years.
And what were the years when you were a resident in West Virginia University?
I started residency at WVU since July 1st, 2011, and to finish 4 years. So it's going to be. I ended the residency at June 2015.
And where did you go? I'm sorry.
And then I came here to Sarasota Memorial Hospital in August 2015, and I have been there since.
Thank you, Doctor. In layperson's terms, will you explain to the members of the jury the discipline of psychiatry and what it involves?
Well, psychiatry is a field that we try to understand the behavioral issues of a patient as well as the psychiatric makeup, which means that how basically because of some conditions, the mind is a very peculiar thing, you know. So you have a brain and then you have a mind, which is the map of the brain. And then you have to treat the symptom that generated by the mind, basically.
All right, thank you. Will you please explain the nature of your practice at Sarasota Memorial Hospital?
I am the staff psychiatrist at Bayside Behavioral Health Center, which is located right behind Sarasota Memorial Hospital. And my duty at Bayside included rounding on the patient, seeing the new patient that comes in, and follow them through until they get discharged and safely discharged. And in the afternoon, I would see patient on consult service for Sarasota Memorial Hospital. So anyone that needs any psychiatric concern, I would go and see that person.
Do you divide your time, morning and afternoon, between those two facilities?
We don't have to, but normally that's what I do.
All right, thank you. Now, did there come a time when you met a patient by the name of Marcia Soul?
Yes.
When did you first encounter Ms. Soul? Well, before I ask you that, Doctor, can you tell us when was she sent to Bayside Behavioral Facility?
She was sent to Bayside on January 15, 2017.
All right. And had she been sent to Bayside from Sarasota Memorial Hospital?
I'm sorry?
Had she been sent over to Bayside, the physical
Correct.
plant from Sarasota?
She was seen by my colleague, Dr. Nadim, who first encountered her at Bayside.
All right. And why don't you tell us when you first encountered her?
I saw her the very next day. January 16, 2017. And it is the practice at Bayside that another physician can admit the patient into Bayside and then assign the patient to another physician. And Dr. Nadim admitted Marcia into Bayside and then assigned a case to me to follow up on the next day.
All right. And did you begin to follow up the next day, January 16th of 2017?
Very much.
Doctor, will you please describe your first encounter with Ms. Soul?
If I recall correctly, she was quite upset that she was sent over to Bayside. And she was tearful. I would describe her to be as disheveled. She insists that we are keeping her here against her will wrongly because she's not suicidal.
All right. Did you perform a psychiatric intake on Ms. Soul on January 16th during your first encounter with her?
Well, I wouldn't say it's an intake. The intake was performed by Dr. Nadim, so I have to review his finding.
Yes.
And then I would have to do my own investigations and evaluation of the patient.
And did you do that? Did you do your own investigation and
Yes,
evaluation
ma'am.
of Ms. Soul?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. When you read the notes from Dr. Nadim, did you have some serious concerns about Ms. Soul?
Obviously, I had some concern. On the surface, any of us who see a patient coming in saying that the FBI, is after them, is trying to hurt them, the very first thing in our training is that is this patient in the right frame of mind? Is this patient responding to some kind of an internal stimuli. And obviously, just by hearing that, I'm concerned that is she paranoid? Is she delusional? Is she having a medical condition that can cause all of this?
And I just want to clarify one thing. Did she ever tell you that it was the FBI, or did she say it was a local law enforcement? That was found in the notes from...
Objection.
It is leading, I'll sustain the objection, rephrase.
Were you told by Ms. Soul that it was local law enforcement, a local deputy, that inflicted the injuries on her?
If I remember correctly, she said that it's the FBI police officer.
Okay, so a police officer. And somehow the FBI got garbled in there?
Correct.
All right, so...
Sustained.
Right. So you were saying that you have to take the nature of those current allegations very seriously.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, okay. What did you do to investigate whether those allegations were indeed delusional or whether they were fact?
So part of my job is to, the nature of how the patient came to me was that it was stated in the Baker Act that she was suicidal. And so it's my job to make sure that she's safe to go home, or we can treat her if she has any psychiatric issues here. So by reading the medical record from Dr. Nadim, I'm concerned that is this patient in the right frame of mind? Is she's having a psychotic breakdown? Is she's having a urinary tract infection that might cause her to say all of these things? Because a delusion is when somebody says something that very much, oppose the norm. If we take 100 of us and we hear people say that someone in law enforcement is trying to go after that person, the majority of us will say that's it's not true, And so I consider what she's saying is a non-bizarre delusion at that point until I can investigate further. Okay. So
well, let's stop for just a minute and talk about that. First of all, you used a term non-bizarre delusion. What does that mean, doctor?
A non-bizarre delusion is it could be a delusion, but it could also happen. It could also be true.
And why did you classify what she told you and what had been in the reports that you read as a non-bizarre delusion?
Well, because it's just the nature of what it is. So maybe I can clarify it by giving you an example.
Yes, please.
If I say to all of you that the car that I saw was flying around in Sarasota, then you would say that a bizarre delusion, that car at this point is not flying, right? But then if I was to say that somebody broke into my house, and even if that never happened, I saw nothing on the camera, even that is a delusion, let's say. However, it could happen. It could have somebody broke in and the camera somehow didn't record it. So when it has some truth to it, then we say it's a non-bizarre, so we have to look further into it.
Okay. Did you, before we go on to talk about the story that she told you, did you look at her previous history as part of your psychiatric intake?
I have learned that she also had another encounter and was seen by my supervisor, Dr. Aslanian,
okay.
That she was very similar complaint that she came in and said that she was, she told Dr. Lerner that she was suicidal, and that's how she ended up at Bayside. And
when was that former incident in which Dr. Aslanian was involved?
I believe it's sometime around October 2016.
All right, and at that time, did she agree or admit that she was suicidal in October of 2016, and that was the reason why she was eventually ended up at Bayside?
I believe so.
Okay. So in this case, although she said that she had made a prior suicide threat, did she adamantly deny the current notes by Dr. Lerner that she had made a suicide threat on December 29th, where she ended up at Bayside eventually on the 16th of January?
Correct. She told me that she had a prior suicidal ideations. However, this particular encounter, she repeatedly told me that she was not suicidal.
All right. And did she also deny that she had sent Dr. Lerner a suicide note?
Nature of the objection.
Testifying from the soul.
Sustained.
Did she deny that? Did she deny contacting Dr. Lerner and telling him that she wanted to commit suicide?
Well, the nature of, I was concerned when my patient sent a suicidal note to her primary care physicians.
Yes.
And when I confronted her about that, she said that she did not send such suicidal notes, because I spoke to Dr. Lerner myself about that particular note, but I never saw the copy of what she wrote or to be able to tell you more about that.
Okay. But was it present in the notes or the consultation with Dr. Lerner that she had sent a recent suicide note to him?
Correct.
Was that part of your psychiatric intake?
Part of my assessment was to confirm that there was a suicidal note sent to him, and that there was a suicidal note sent to him.
All right, thank you. Now, did you look at the previous notes from staff with regard to Miss Soul's psychiatric history?
Yes.
Did you ever see any documentation in any of those notes that she had suffered from hallucinations?
Even Dr. Aslanian and Dr. Nadim said that it's stated there might be depressions disorder with psychotic feature, because if one believed that this is a delusion, then that would classify to be a psychotic feature. However, in their documentation, they stated that they did not observe her to be psychotic.
Okay, and did you observe her to be psychotic?
For my very brief encounter with the patient, I do not believe that she's psychotic.
All right. Was the absence of hallucinations that was noted by the other doctors, and also from your own observations, was that absence significant to you?
Very much.
Why?
Well, psychotic features come in different ways. Disorganization of thought is one of them. Hallucination in terms of visual and auditory, paranoia, and delusions. They are symptoms of psychosis. And I did not see the disorganization. I did not see the auditory or visual hallucination. The paranoia and the delusion component is in the gray area, that it could be, if none of this was substantiated, then it looks like it could be a paranoia. It could also be a delusion.
Okay. So at this point in your assessment of Miss Soul, you are working under the assumption that she said a cop or some law enforcement tried to kill her, and that was a red flag to you. Is
Correct.
All right. Did you take further steps based upon your questioning of whether that was true or not? Did you take further steps to gather information about Miss Soul?
Yes, I have.
What did you do, doctor?
My job as a psychiatrist is to make sure that the patient is safe from herself and also from other people. And right now she's at the time she was at Bayside, so she's safe in some way. So my job was to make sure that if this was a result of a medical conditions or a medication-induced symptoms, I want to make sure that we have to stop the offending agent. If this was a result of a urinary tract infections, we want to get that treated. And if this was somehow, there's some truth to it, I'm not here to, my job was not to figure out what's going on outside in her life, whether this was actually happened and we need to protect her, etc. So my job was to make sure that I'm making the right judgment to send this person out to the public being safe. So, so obviously, through my psychiatric examination and with the patient, and talking and obtaining collateral informations, I have to be able to decipher that yes, this is not a delusion, or it is a delusion.
Okay. Well, you mentioned three things. You mentioned you have to look at the medications, you have to look at whether or not she has a urinary tract infection, a UTC, and then you also have to find out if her story holds some truth.
Correct.
All right, so let's talk about the medications first. What did you do as part of your assessment with Ms. Saul with reference to her medications?
Well, she came in, she was quite tearful, and tearfulness and difficulty regulating one's affects is usually induced by steroid, and she was on steroidal medications. So I called Dr. Lerner's office and I asked him if I can taper her off this medication, and Dr. Lerner said that it was a very short course of steroid, so she doesn't have to be taper off, and we can just stop the medication. So we have done that.
All right. And did you also explore whether or not she had a urinary tract infection?
We tried to obtain a urinary analysis, and at the time, patient was very upset about her being there and not able to provide us any or comply with lab or urinary sample.
Okay. And then finally, you told us that you also needed to explore the story that she was telling you and try to determine whether it was fact or fiction.
Correct.
So what did you do to resolve that particular issue?
I believe that initially I raised a question, you know, that is she having some memory problem? Is she's having, she's 79, so she's about to go into a full-blown of dementia, for example.
Yes.
How can I rely on the information that's subjectively provided to me?
Yes.
So I make sure that, you know, her memory is fine, because in Dr. Nadim note, he said that her short-term memory was mildly impaired and her long-term was intact. A short-term memory loss is usually indicative of the beginning of some form of dementia, and people with dementia, for example, can have this kind of delusions. So I perform a screening test called mini mental status exam, just to see where she is in terms of her memory and her cognitive functioning.
All right. Tell the jury, what is the purpose of the mini mental status exam?
The mini mental status exam is a screening tool for us to use to gauge where the patient is at in terms of her short-term memory, her long-term memory, her immediate recall, her cognitive capacity at that given time in front of me at that point.
Okay. Can you tell us, what do you mean by cognitive capacity?
Cognitive functions, I meant whether she is able to make medical decisions for herself, whether she is having memory problem, whether all of this was within her confused mind. She's generating all of this. So I have to make sure that she's not confused, she's not having altered mental status, and her memory is fine.
All right. Tell us a little bit about how the mini mental status exam works.
The mini mental status exam is a series of questions, and total score for the mini mental status exam is 30 points. It has various questions asking whether the patient is oriented to the season of the year, the month, the day of the week. It's also asked whether the patient is oriented to the place, what's the name of the hospital, what floor of the hospital you're on, and then also to test the patient for immediate recall and delayed recall. So I will give the patient 3 items to remember, and I will inform the patient that I will try to trick you by asking you many other questions, and then we'll come back and ask you to see if you remember the 3 items. And that will, everything we ask has a point to it. And if the cutoff for a diagnosis of severe impairment of cognition is at 24, when you say that this patient probably has dementia.
And how did Ms. Soul do? What was her score?
She has very good immediate recall and delayed recall. She even remembered the 3 items I told her the previous day and tell me the very next day. So her memory is very good. And so that's dispute the fact that her short-term memory was mildly impaired. And I just want to point that out too, because sometimes when any client who come into a psychiatric facility, including myself, if I am there for a psychiatric reason, I would be in a shock. And so I have to take all of that in considerations. That is this influenced by the patient's own mind or is the external environment. But overall, she scored 28, 29 out of 30, which is, to me, is pretty normal.
All right. Is a score of 28 or 29 a normal score with no cognitive dysfunction? Based on your background and training?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, you talked about that she was oriented to season, month, date, and day of the week. Are there other ways that you test whether she is aware of her surroundings as part of that mini mental status exam?
Well, she knows where she's at. She's is oriented. She knows the month, the day, and we also talk about general knowledge, and she seemed to be fine with all of that.
All right. Was she up on current events? Did you discuss things like that in order to test her cognitive abilities?
Just ask her about who's the president and things like that.
Yes. And was she able to answer
Correct,
those correctly?
Yeah.
All right. Was she fully engaged in that testing process for the mini mental status exam?
She was. I would describe her to have good social reciprocity. She's answered questions back and forth just like this.
Thank you. Now, did you administer any other tests to Ms. Soul as part of your cognitive assessment of her?
So a lot of us try to ask and the patient to draw a clock, for example. And in drawing the clock will give me a little bit more about her executive functions, her ability to make decisions for her life. That is not to do with her cognitive, it's not having to do with so much of whether she's altered mental status. It's more like to see, can this person plan for herself outside? Can she sustain living independently with no help? So when she was drawing the clock, she's the contour was not a circle, and then she's missing various numbers. So it's just telling me that she has some planning problem in that sense.
All right. Okay, so aside from her planning problems, did you observe anything else about her mental status with regard to the MMSE, the mini mental status exam?
Well, I was satisfied that she was okay. However, because of the nature of the alleged accusation that she had on another police officer, I just want to make sure that, so I order a full neuropsychological testing done by a psychologist.
Yes.
And because of the nature of her insurance, that was not done.
All right, so that,
The
okay.
provider on board with the hospital did not take the insurance she had.
Was there anything else that you used to, was there any other tool or test that you used to diagnose her state, her mental state?
Well, a lot of us rely on the mental status exam, so the name is very confusing. The mini mental status exam is a cognitive functions and a screening tool. The mental status exam is what the psychiatrist used to look at the person, their appearance, their language, their pronunciations. Is there any speech impairment? Is there any paucity in their thinking? Looking into their cognitive thought process and thought content and their concentrations. It's a lot more than it's deeper, but it's more of an observation by the psychiatrist.
And does that have a label or a name, that particular part of your assessment?
It's called the mental status exam.
Okay. Is there something called a MOCA, M-O-C-A?
The MOCA is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and a lot of time we use that with patients who had higher functioning when they was working during their working life. Because even if you score 28, 29, let's say if I was to go in and have a lot of cognitive difficulties, because I know the test, I know the mental status exam, I can probably pass with 28, 29, for example. So there was a MOCA cognitive assessment test, which is a little bit similar to the mini mental status, but it's more in details.
Did you use that as well?
I believe I might have used that, but I don't recall by going back to my note. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk now. I'm sorry that I threw you off the track. Let's talk now about that mental status, the observations that you made. And tell the jury, what were your observations about Miss Soul's mental state or her status?
She looks pretty much in distress for me. She was tearful. She looked disheveled. She ambulated with the assistance of the worker. She dressed appropriately. Her language uses and language understanding was very much intact. She was not hyperverbal in speech. She was normal speech processes. She seemed a little bit ruminative to me. But she adamantly denies that she ever, was suicidal this time. She seemed upset. She seemed tearful. But throughout the encounter with me, I never saw her get distracted to the point that she is responding to internal stimuli. So I can say with confidence that she is not having any responding to internal stimuli, which means another way to say that there's any psychotic symptom. And I don't see any of that, because a patient who's hallucinating, actively seeing things and hearing voices, you can see the distractions when you are in front of that person. I don't see any of that. I don't see any disorganizations of thought in my encounter with her.
Is it unusual for a 79-year-old person to be ruminative?
very much going through if she's experienced any distress, I'm sure, or even if she's in the psychiatric facility.
So it is not.
It's not unusual. I mean, ruminative is just a way to say that there's something on your mind.
Right. And so she keeps returning to that.
Right, correct.
In this particular case, what was she returning to over and over again?
She just wanted me to believe her that she is not trying to end her life, and that somebody is really trying to get her, to go after her.
Right. Thank you. Now, you mentioned in your notes that her story about the cop who tried to kill her was well articulated and detailed. What was significant to you about the well articulated story that contained a great many details when you were trying to determine whether or not she was delusional?
A lot of maybe it might not pertain to this patient, but a lot of my patients, when they were giving me the story of this happened to them, that happened to them, very much is never in specific detail. However, she was able to give me succinct and chronological of what happened to her, and repeatedly. It's sort of when you talk to her today and you talk to her tomorrow, the story doesn't change much.
Right, and we're going to get to the next day, but did you in fact visit her on 2 days in order to perform your psychological assessment?
So I was assigned to the case, so I have to see her. Dr. Nadim saw her on the 15th. I saw her on the 16th and 17th, right, and also on the day of discharge. Thank you. 3 days.
All right. And I just want to go to Dr. Nadim for a moment, and I think you briefly explained a little bit about that initial assessment. Is it unusual for a doctor who does, such as Dr. Nadim, who does an initial assessment, to sometimes note things that after a full assessment by you or other doctors, the second doctor changes their opinion?
Objection.
Pardon me?
Objection.
Oh.
You may answer, Doctor.
I don't know how to answer that in a more political way, but I guess there are physicians that will read what the medical records states and regurgitate it. I'm not saying that Dr. Nadim did that. I cannot answer that for him. I don't know what he's thinking. But for me personally, I want to be able to be responsible for my patients. So I want to say that I acknowledge what Dr. Nadim and other physicians documented, and keep that in mind because they are trained physicians as well. And at the same time, I want to do my independent assessment and come up with what I decide, because it's after all, I am the psychiatrist who will discharge the patient to go home.
Did you reach out to anyone else in order to gather collateral information about Miss Soul?
Miss Soul asked me to call Detective, if I may, am I mispronouncing her name, Gator?
That's correct.
And I called Detective Gator not to go into any details of what happened. I just want to get another opinion of another law enforcement officer, just to tell me. I was looking to see if there is any truth to this, or sometimes the law enforcement will say to me that I have been out to her place, I have investigated, I have done many things, and there is no truth to this. Then I would say, well, that means I have to believe the law enforcement and say this is a delusion. However, when I called Detective Gator, she told me that
Your Honor, this is part of his diagnosis. He has testified that in order to form his opinion, he must make Dr. Dinh, did you contact Detective Gaeta
I did.
in order to gather collateral information with respect to the allegations that Ms. Soul was making?
Correct.
And what did Dr. Gaeta tell you?
Detective Gaeta, maybe if I clarify this, I didn't want to get into the detail of what she was going. I don't remember exactly, but this is the purpose of my phone call.
Doctor, can I just interrupt you for
Yeah,
just
sure.
one minute, okay? Because of this issue, I'm going to allow you to lead in this particular line of questioning.
Yes, sir.
So go ahead and lead.
And I want you to, without telling us what Detective Gaeta specifically said to you, I want to ask you, did you learn from Detective Gaeta that there was a full-blown, ongoing investigation with regard to Ms. Soul's allegations?
She did not tell me that there was a full-blown investigation. She's told me that the department was taking the allegations seriously.
All right.
And that all was what I need to know, really, because that means to me that my patient, there was some truth. All I want, the logic behind here was, is this a delusion versus a non-delusion issues? And if there's some truth to it, and then some other people are looking into it, to me that means she is safe in some way, that law enforcement is looking into this.
Okay. And did that also factor in to your final diagnosis of Ms. Soul's mental state?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Before we talk about your opinion with regard to Ms. Soul's mental state, I want to ask you about her medication at the time that you had her as your patient at Bayside. What sort of medication was she receiving at the time?
She was receiving a psychotropic medication called Abilify.
And did you keep her on Abilify?
I kept her on Abilify.
Why?
Abilify is classified to be an antipsychotic medication. However, it also has a lot of property in helping a person with their mood and also depressions and anxiety. And it works a lot faster than a lot of other agents, and she was on that medication to begin with. So I saw the tearfulness in her, I saw the depressions in her, and I thought that the Abilify would help her to calm some of this anxiety down.
Did you prescribe the Abilify because you believed she was psychotic?
Absolutely not. The way...
Go ahead. Would you like to?
May I clarify one point, please?
I'll
sir?
ask you the question. And
Yes.
would you like to clarify that, Doctor?
Sure. Yeah.
Please do so.
Right now, looking at the case, knowing that when I discharged her, but at the time when I decided to continue the medication, there was, if in my mind, there was a question that this might be a delusion, and the medication is very appropriate.
All right. But was the Abilify also to address her depression and anxiety from which she suffered?
Correct. A lot of us use that way.
Thank you. Is Abilify something that you prescribe to other patients who are not psychotic?
I have many patients on Abilify without having any psychotic feature.
Thank you. You talked about seeing Miss Soul on the 16th of January. Did you again meet with her on the 17th?
Yes, I did. I met with her every day.
All right. And for what purpose did you meet with her on the 17th? Or describe your encounter with her
It's,
that day?
we follow the patient every day, and we want to make sure that what we see the previous day did not change, or that they change in some way. Did we give the right medication? Did the medication help? Did the medication did not help? So on and so forth. Just like any physician following up with their patients.
And did anything change with Miss Soul and your assessment of her between the 16th and the 17th, Doctor?
When I came in to see her, I remember that morning pretty well because I came in right after the police department or someone that came to take pictures of her bruises.
Are you referring to the 17th now?
Correct, yeah,
Right.
the next day.
Yes.
And so, so she was quite upset of that whole event.
Because they had come to take photographs of her injuries?
Correct, and also just because of the you know, she's on the acute unit and people coming in, and she's, I don't know why and how in her mind, but she's appeared to be more upset, and again she's continued to indicate that she was not suicidal. She wants someone to believe her.
Did she appear to have any cognitive difficulties on the 17th?
No, every day that I saw her, I performed the mini mental status exam, including the day of discharge, and my finding was consistent that she did not have any cognitive difficulties at the time.
Did Miss Soul insist to you that you contact Detective Gaeta?
Yes.
What was the significance of that, Doctor, in your mind with regard to her mental state or your diagnosis?
Didn't we just cover this?
I believe we did, but
It would be, I understand the objection. The objection is sustained, and I'm also finding it is duplicitous, I guess is the word.
duplicative.
We've already covered the particular area of calling, calling Detective Gaeta, haven't we?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. When you said, didn't we just cover this, I thought you meant something else. Now, may we approach?
Sure.
Okay, Doctor, I'm going to ask you, was there some significance with regard to your diagnosis when you when you heard Miss Soul repeating over and over again to please contact Detective Gaeta? How did that figure into your mindset about her mental status?
When she asked me to call the detective, I gathered that she wants me to believe her. She wants me to say that there is some truth to it, and it has been ongoing. If you don't believe, she kept saying, if you don't believe me, call someone and verify this, which is to me, it's a good judgment. You know, if you don't believe me, and I say, don't believe me, ask my wife, ask my friend, ask my colleagues. You know.
Okay, so is it a demonstration of her logical abilities?
Correct. Yes.
All right, thank you. Did you eventually release Miss Soul?
Yes, I did.
When did you do that, Doctor?
On, I believe, January 18th.
And why did you release her?
When the patient asks us to send, any patient asks me to send them home, first of all, they came into Bayside, let's say under the Baker Act. I cannot keep anyone against their will. I have to respect their autonomy as part of my job. So when Ms. Soul asked me repeatedly that I do not want to be here, I want to go home, I want to be able to respect her autonomy and send her home in a safe way. So not only that I looked into her psychiatric component, I was looking at whether she was able to take her medication, whether she was able to cook for her meals, whether she was able to go and see and follow with her doctors, whether she's complying with any medication we prescribe. So we're looking at a number of things, not just the psychiatric component that the patient comes in with.
If you, and what was your diagnosis? What was your final diagnosis after you saw Miss Soul on the 16th, 17th, and 18th and completed your assessment of her?
If you may, I want to refer back to my discharge.
Yes, if it
to make
would
sure.
help to refresh your recollection, you may, Doctor.
I put down on my discharge summary that the discharge diagnosis is major depressive disorder, recurrent severe, rule out steroid-induced mood disorder, and also what seemed like psychosis 2 and delusional. However, there's some truth to what she's been accusing, that she has been accusing of.
Thank you. If she had been delusional, Doctor, even if she were insisting upon leaving, would you have released her?
I would not.
May I confer with co-counsel?
Amen.
I don't have anything further, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lake, cross-examination, sir.
Morning. Morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Just on that last point, I'm going to cover basically directly some of the questions that were asked by the state prosecutor. I'm going to follow along basically the same trail she just covered, okay? But I want to stop and go back to whether you would release her if she was delusional or psychotic. You were aware that she had a history going back 20 years of mental health issues.
Correct.
You had talked to Dr. Lerner, a treating physician.
Correct.
She had been Baker acted on a number of occasions and kept in mental health facilities, am I right?
Correct.
And in those facilities, we're looking at issues like delusional behavior and paranoia, right?
I'm not sure. I don't have any of those medical records at the time.
In your education, training, and experience, would that be typical with other psychiatrists might be looking at those symptoms in other facilities, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Okay, and then they would have to make independent decisions whether they would keep the patient or not.
Correct.
Okay. And I think in fairness to you, that's because your job essentially is to determine whether someone is a threat to themselves or to others.
Correct.
And that's a paramount concern of yours.
Very much.
All right. When you had looked, going back to some of the questions on direct, when you had looked at her medical history, that history included prior Baker Acts?
Correct.
Okay. And can you recall from your memory, prior to October of 16, how many other times she'd been Baker Act?
I don't recall, but I think she had been in other facility before that.
Okay. And she, do you know whether or not she'd been treated prior at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital in Bayside unit for psychological issues?
Correct.
Okay. And you say you've been in practice roughly 6 years?
Correct. Four of the 6 is in my training.
All right. You testified that in your observations of her at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, she was not suicidal or homicidal. Am I right about that?
Correct.
And, but you don't know prior to her going to the hospital, and I'll represent to you that was around the 12th, what her condition was, say, in December, the month before.
No, I only know her at the time that I met her.
Right. And you don't know in, say, November or December of 16 whether in fact she was delusional or paranoid.
I can attest to any of that.
You did talk to Dr. Lerner in this case?
Very briefly,
And it would be important to learn from Dr. Lerner his information about his patient.
Correct. Yeah.
And that helps educate you to understand the predicament that she's in at the time you were evaluating her.
Correct.
And he made some recommendations to you with respect to the issue of steroid use.
Correct.
And that is because you and I could agree that steroids perhaps has a collateral effect on someone psychologically.
Correct.
Okay. And someone who's, especially someone who may have a massive dose or a high dose who's in their late 70s, would you believe me on that? Agree with me on that?
I don't know if it's dose dependent, but I go with that.
Right. What would be the psychological effect, some side effect from steroids in an older person?
They could present manic, they could present with mood lability, they could present with some psychotic feature and paranoia.
Mood stability, and you say manic. Can you tell the jury what that term means?
A manic episode is entailing, but the patient is very much goal-directed, feeling invincible, feeling like having many different projects going on and wanting to finish this and feeling a lot of self-inflated esteem. And talk loudly, for example, and talk fast because her mind is racing, for example.
They could be irritable.
They could be irritable. That's I wouldn't consider irritability as a sign of mania.
In your discussions with Dr. Lerner, he represented to you that some of the patient's statements are not based in reality. Remember that at all?
I'm sorry?
Did he represent to you, Dr. Lerner, that some of the patient's statements may not be based on reality? Do you recall that?
Well, I don't think he said anything to that. In fact, he just told me that the reason he had her Baker acted because he received the suicidal notes.
Okay. Can I approach you on a minute? This is the paragraph we look at towards the end. Let's read that to us.
May I see that again, please? Thank you. Thanks.
You will. Approach me. For the record, this is offenses in J. You got a chance to look at that?
Yes, absolutely.
And towards the end, it says Dr. Lerner is of the belief that patient statements are not reality-based, hence the reason for wanting to have a neuropsych testing done to see if something organic is going on as well. Am I right? And
that's what is said in there.
Right. And do you recall talking to him about that?
Yeah. So Sarah, this is what the author of that note is Sarah.
Yes.
You should ask her how she has that conversation with Dr. Lerner, but I don't recall that he said that to me. The neuropsychological testing was my recommendation that because of the nature of the accusations, one should look into that further and at least stop the steroid.
In Exhibit J, which I'll represent to you as evidence.
Objection, Your Honor. The doctor has already said that he did not author that, and it was someone else, and that you should ask the author of that.
Does that ever finish my question?
Finish your question.
In Exhibit J, which is evidence in this case, it says
No.
I want to come back to your phone call with Dr. Lerner. You, very clearly, doctor, had a telephone conversation with Dr. Lerner. Am I right about that?
Correct.
Okay, and in that phone call, he told you that she had a history of mental health issues.
Correct.
And he said to you at some point that some statements made by Ms. Sola may not be based in reality. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that he said that to me, but I am aware of the accusation of my patient made of another police officer, and that's the whole thing.
I'm not asking about that, Doctor.
Right, but I don't recall.
Okay, I apologize for interrupting you. I was asking about whether or not the other statement was made. Okay, let's move on. So ultimately, she was not able to leave the the side of the practice that you do, okay, the psychiatrist is different from the role of the psychologist, am I right?
Correct.
Okay, can you explain that difference to the jury?
We have different training from a psychologist. A psychologist perform more detailed tests. I think pertaining to this case, I mean, obviously there are two schools of school of psychology, school of psychiatry is very different. However, in my training, I have to understand what they do so that we can use what they do to help us to clarify some of the diagnoses that we have. But they are different, and they are trained more with psychological testing, and they spend hours with particular patients. And for us, we are relying more of the symptoms that we see in the DSM and the symptom that we see in the psychiatric standpoint. So it's kind of different. I don't know if I can clearly distinguish the two.
It would be fair to say that psychologists would spend a lot more time digging into other psychological issues.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then they can make a diagnosis themselves.
Correct.
Okay. And that didn't happen in this case because we have no knowledge that she treated with a psychologist.
No, she did not. She was not seen by a psychologist.
Okay, I wrote this down on direct. You said the word trained physicians as well. So the doctors that are in the emergency room and the doctors that may be your colleagues, the people you work with, they are kind of on the front line, so to speak. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. And they have a lot of experience because they deal with a lot of people that come in and out of the emergency room. In terms of,
I would hope so.
okay. And that would involve not just physical manifestations, but mental health issues that they see.
I would hope so, but all of us know the reality sometimes.
Right, and you have no reason to not believe anything that those treating physicians in the emergency room tell you.
The basis is he's trying to backdoor some kind of dark.
Judge, I would discuss this side. Right, doctor. You talked about, is it Dr. Nadine?
Nadine, yeah.
Did you actually speak with him about Marcia Soul's case, her condition?
No, I did not. I just read his record.
Okay, and you read other records as well from other
Correct.
emergency room physicians? Okay. And I asked you about their abilities to treat people and make their own assessments, and they can do that.
I would hope so.
Do you have any knowledge of whether or not Ms. Soul has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or bipolar in the past?
I don't recall knowing that.
So you personally have never read any medical records that might relate to that?
Well, there's a lot of things that was put in the medical record, and once again, you asking me my assessment at the time I saw Mrs. Soul versus somebody saw her at a different time. She might have been under the influence, she might have been under the influence of medication, she might have been so many things, what if,
Right.
So therefore, a lot of time I look through it, I acknowledge what other physicians wrote about her, even included in the ER. A lot of time the diagnosis get changed by that particular person, psychiatrist.
You saw her in the hospital for approximately 2 to 3 days,
Correct.
72 hours. And there are other facilities that saw her for 10 days or 15 days with psychiatrists. You aware of that?
I'm aware of that.
And they would be in a very good position to make a diagnosis if they had that much time with her.
I cannot speak for them, sir. I'm sorry.
But you would agree with me that they would probably be in a better position than you to make an assessment if they had 10 days with the patient.
I wouldn't say that either.
I understand. I respect that. One minute. You had made some recordation of her condition when you first saw her, let's say on the 16th, I think it is in your notes?
Correct.
Okay. And then some point later, you talked to Detective Gator. Am I right?
I would say that I make the document the record and talk to the Detective Gator. I spoke to the Detective Gator at some point during my encounter with the patients.
Right. And there was I think the word was a full-blown investigation, am I right?
I testified earlier that I don't remember hearing the word full-blown investigation. I know that the department was taking it seriously.
Right, right. But you don't have any information about what happened over at the Soul home at 5:30 in the morning on the 12th, do you?
Only subjectively from the patient.
Right. You have no idea what happened in that home?
Correct.
I have nothing else. Thank you, Doctor.
Redirect.
Dr. Dinh, psychologists, do they have a medical degree?
No, they don't.
And psychiatrists such as you do have a medical degree. All right. As part of your ethical and professional training and standards, is it important for you to conduct your own individual assessment and investigation into a patient's mental state?
I would hope that I do, but I value my practice and my privilege highly, and I do want to come up with an independent assessment rather than rely on some other physician assessment. I'm not saying that their assessment are not right or wrong, but maybe they was not trained in psychiatry. They was trained in the emergency room, for example, to perform intubation and do other things, which I'm not comfortable doing either.
Right. So, do you have much more training than in psychiatry, and are you able to perform psychological testing as opposed to an ER physician?
In my 4 years of residency, I spent 2 months in ER medicine and the rest in psychiatry. And an ER physician probably spent a month in psychiatry and the rest in ER and other medicine.
Okay. I have nothing further, Doctor.
Doctor, you may step down, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Subject to recall?
No.
Doctor, you are released from your subpoena. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, looks like our time to take our first mid-morning break. Why don't we plan on taking 15 minutes and reconvene about 25 up? See you then.
All right, are you leaving? All right, yours, Eric.
Folks, please have a seat. Mr. Wagner, you want to take the stand, please, sir? Please recall that you are under oath.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Wagner.
Good morning.
Yesterday we left off and you were just beginning to explain your further investigation that you conducted in this case on Saturday, January 14th of 2017. Will you please tell the members of the jury what you did on that day with regard to this investigation?
On that day, I responded to Frank Bybee's residence at 5748 43rd Court East for execution of a search warrant.
All right. And did you did you walk around with the detectives who were conducting that search warrant pursuant to this case, pursuant to a warrant in this case?
Yes, I did. Walk around, photograph the scene. Also, anything that detectives found that they thought may be of evidentiary value, I would also photograph that prior to collecting it.
Okay. Did there come a time when you took photographs in Mr. Bybee's garage?
Yes, I did.
have been marked as State's Exhibit 37A, 37B, and 37C for identification. Can you look at those, please? Do you recognize them, Mr. Wagner?
Yes, I do.
Are they an accurate reflection of the contents, or some of the contents of Mr. Bybee's garage on the day that you searched his house?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I'm offering into evidence State's Exhibit 37A, 37B, and 37C.
No objection.
No objection. 37A, B, and C are admitted and may be published after you come over here for a second.
Yes, sir. We are now looking at State's Exhibit 37A. Describe the records that you're able to look into.
This is from the outside of the house, photographing into the garage. This door back here goes out into the into the residence. There's another door over here that goes into the side yard. In this particular image, we're wanting to photograph the vehicle rotisserie here, showing that there is a car on top of it. Same thing is showing the car rotisserie, showing the front view of it. There is a label here. There wasn't any identifying information as far as a model number that we were able to locate, so I'm just photographing the labels that are on there. And this was a close-up of that label that was just shown before, just showing some of the warning safety hazards, what kind of weight it will be able to operate.
Did you conduct further investigation in this case?
Yes, I did.
And did you retrieve evidence from Mr. Bybee's home on that same day?
Yes, we did. No.
Now showing you what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 33. Would you please take a look at that? I'm going to give you some solutions.
Sorry. Yes, I do recognize it.
How do you recognize it, Mr. Wagner?
Same thing as mentioned before. In this case, it's in plastic, so it doesn't have the brown paper bag as previous items. It has our label on it. It has seal. This was actually sealed by someone from Digital Forensics that has their seal and information on it. But it has my label on it with my name and the item number and everything that was collected under.
Your Honor, I'm offering into evidence State's Exhibit 33.
No objection.
No objection. 33 is admitted. May be published.
Could you please open this up and display it to the members of the jury?
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Wagner, would you please stand and display State's Exhibit 33 to the members of the jury?
It's a home EVR system used for video surveillance. Cameras will plug into the back of it, and then there's a hard drive inside that will record the video that is obtained throughout the security.
Did you retrieve that from the Bybee residence?
Yes, I did.
Can you please tell the jury where it was located in the Bybee residence?
It was in an office area that had a computer desk in it. There was also a bed in the room, but it was on top of a hutch that had a TV above that.
At the time that you retrieved it, was it plugged in and operating?
It was plugged in. I'm not sure if it was operating at the time.
May I have Mr. Wagner come down and identify who's next?
He certainly may.
Mr. Wagner, I'm showing you the marks for identification, and it states that there are 25A and 25B. If you look at those and tell the members of the jury to recognize them.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
Once again, the other items, there's labels on there. These have the evidence tape on back that has my initial ID and the date that I sealed them. The label shows the description of the item, what's inside the bag.
No objection.
No objection, 25A and B are admitted and may be published.
These were they were recovered from inside the garage of Mr. Bybee's residence.
Now, let's look at that.
Yes.
You recognize that blue box as the same blue box on which you obtained the blue box
Yes, this is the same brand and type of gloves that we use for our agency.
I would also like you to tell us, did there come a time when you retrieved a check from Mr. Bybee's residence?
Yes, I did.
I'm showing you what has been admitted into evidence. States Exhibit number 11. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
Is check number 870. The check is issued to Frank Bybee. This was located in his kitchen on a bar area connected from the kitchen to the living room area.
If I display this check to you, would it help you in your testimony?
Yes, it would.
Any other checks with that signature on the bottom?
No, I did not.
Did you continue your forensic investigation on another day, Saturday, January 14th?
Yes, I did.
Tell the members of the jury where your further examination is.
All right, on Sunday, January 15th, a search warrant was executed on Mr. Bybee's truck at our crime scene unit garage. It's a secured facility that has an alarm on it, so that we have evidence there at times where we're working on.
Now showing you what have been marked for identification as States Exhibit 32A, 32B, 32C, and 32D. Will you look at those, please, Mr. Wagner? You recognize those, sir?
Yes, I do.
They are an excellent collection of photographs.
Yes, they are.
Runner-up offering 32A, 32B, 32C, and 32D in evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. No objection having been heard, 32A through D are admitted and may be published at your discretion.
This is the back seat area of Mr. Bybee's Ford F-150, or I'm sorry, F-250. Just showing this on the floorboard here is another pair of gloves matching the same style that was found in his residence.
And States Exhibit 32B, what do we have here?
Another box of gloves matching the same description. I believe the next photo will make it a little bit easier to tell where it's at, but this was in the bed of the truck inside of somewhat like a milk crate. This is in a toolbox in the back of the truck, one of the silver ones that kind of hangs over the edge of the bed. Has two doors on it, lifts up, and there were two boxes located in there. This is the crate where the one box of gloves came out that I was referring to. Also inside the crate was a Ziploc bag that had several other gloves inside that.
Did you conduct investigation on another day?
Yes, I did.
When was that?
The next day on on January 16th, collected buccal swabs from Mr. Bybee.
And did you do further work on Tuesday, January 17th?
Yes, I did.
And what did that work entail?
The 17th was responded back to Ms. Soul's residence, took more photographs, photographed her car.
Did you collect her electronic devices?
Yes, I did. Her computer from the office area. I believe there was a tablet that was collected, keyboard, other electronics.
When you say a tablet, do you mean an electronic tablet?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. Did you also gather checkbooks from Ms. Soul's residence on that day, Tuesday, January 17th?
Yes, there were several checkbooks. Most of them had the carbon copies in them. We collected 4 of those just to show any possible writing samples that we may need.
Right. Were you able to find in your search of Ms. Soul's residence that day the checkbook starting at number 830, that particular series of checks?
No, we were not.
Did you do further work on Wednesday, January the 18th?
Yes, we did.
And what did you do that day, please?
We were given a consent to search Troy King's truck. So at that time, the vehicle was searched, processed for fingerprints, and also possible DNA with his consent.
Oh, what?
With King's consent.
Yes. Was there anything of evidentiary value found in that truck?
No, we did swap, like I said, we swapped several areas. Swabs were sent off. There was a drill that had apparently been lent out to Mr. Bybee, so that drill was inside the car, so I processed that drill also just in case it became important later on.
All right, thank you. Now, you talked about obtaining buccal swabs from Mr. Bybee, from Mr. King, and from Ms. Soul. Did you send those buccal swabs for further analysis?
Yes, they were sent to FDLE, which is Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and also DNA Labs, which is a privatized lab.
And in addition to those 3 buccal swabs that you just mentioned, did you also send other items for processing?
Yes, several other swabs were sent for DNA comparison to be compared to the buccal swabs that were sent.
Can you please announce to the jury what actually was sent? And if you need to refresh your recollection, please
Thank you.
look in your notes.
The items sent to DNA Lab were a swab from the car keys that were inside Ms. Soul's residence. As I stated before, there were a set of keys that were hanging up between the door from the kitchen going into the garage. Swabbed those for touch DNA. Those were sent. The blue nightgown that Ms. Soul was wearing was also sent to DNA Labs. I did swab the steering wheel, the drill handle from Mr. King's truck to send those to DNA Labs. The white dish towel that was found on the floor. I swabbed the pill bottle that was on the floor of Ms. Soul's residence, where the pill bottles were spread out on the floor. And then also a swab from a vermouth bottle that was recovered from the refrigerator of Ms. Soul's residence.
Let's talk about those items individually. Was there any evidence recovered from the car keys?
Car keys was a mixed profile, but was unable to be identified.
So essentially nothing.
Correct.
Evidentiary value.
Correct.
What about the blue nightgown that belonged to Ms. Soul?
Yes, blue nightgown on the left sleeve, Bybee was excluded. On the right sleeve, there was a mixture of at least 5 individuals, and they were unable to do anything with that mixture to identify if Bybee was included or not included. They couldn't say one way or the other.
What about the swabs of Mr. Troy's truck, including the steering wheel and the drill, etc.?
Those came back to Mr. King and also another individual. I don't have his name written right here. I can look at.
It doesn't matter. It's
Okay.
not, was it Frank Bybee?
No, it was not.
Individual Frank Bybee. All right. You also mentioned pill bottles.
Yes.
Any evidentiary value in those pill bottles from the swabbings that you took?
No, there was not.
You mentioned a vermouth bottle.
Correct.
Anything that provided evidence in this case?
No, it just came back to the victim.
Ms. Soul?
Yes, Miss Soul.
All right. Was there anything else that you mentioned that I forgot in my list?
Not for DNA labs, no.
All right. Now, did you also send items to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, I did.
Will you please tell us what you sent to those, to that lab for analysis?
Sent the swab a a white envelope that was received at the Sheriff's Department with checks inside it. CSA Slovacek had already started processing. I sent that to DNA labs for analysis on the seal where you would look at the seal it. Also swabbed the diluted blood from the kitchen sink. When I did a presumptive in there earlier, it showed a positive reaction. Sent that to FDLE for analysis. They ended up coming back with no DNA on that. Sent 3 swabs from the chair. There was an area of blood up at the top of the chair and then 2 at the bottom right hand of the chair. Sent all those to FDLE for analysis. Those all came back to Ms. Soul. The buccal swabs, as mentioned earlier, and then 4 checks, 830 through 833, and also check number 8, see certain things down, duplicate kind of what's written on the checks so that they can use those for writing comparisons to say whether or not it's believed this person was the original author or if there's a possibility someone else wrote it.
All right. Let's talk about, aside from the checks with the handwriting analysis, let's talk about the other items that you sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Now, why was it important for you to, the seal of the envelope? You mentioned that you sent the seal of the envelope
Yes.
for testing.
Yes.
And was there any results of that testing of the
It said that
adhesive on the back of the envelope?
it just said that the results were not interpretable.
All right, thank you. What about the samples from the kitchen sink of Ms. Soul's home?
Those came back as no DNA.
And the blood on the chair?
Came back as Miss Soul.
Thank you. On Thursday, February 2nd of 2017, did you have an opportunity to search the defendant's patrol car?
Yes, I did.
A, 35B, 35C, 35B. Can you say those, please? Did you read the text?
Yes, I did.
Are they an accurate reflection of the photographs that you took of Mr. Bybee control home?
Yes, they are.
You are offering evidence 35A, 35B, 35C, 35D.
No objection.
No objection having been heard. 35A, B, C, and D are all admitted and may be published at your discretion.
This is a back photo of the patrol car. It's patrol car number 132. It's a Chevy Impala. And this is the sheriff's office license plate number that is on the car.
Were you able to verify that this car 132 was operated by Mr. White?
Based on the detectives and also supervisor for patrol, they say that that was the vehicle that was assigned to him.
S35C.
This is just another photograph of it, showing the side of it to just have a better view of what type of vehicle it is.
Now we're looking at space 35C, and explain what we're looking at in this photograph.
This photograph is where the trunk is open, just showing there are belongings in the trunk. Showing over here on the right-hand side, there's a milk crate, several items in the milk crate, including the type of gloves that we saw earlier. This is inside that same milk crate. After we had taken the gloves out and started searching through it, there was a pad of paper here that became of interest, ended up having information relating to Marcia Soul and I believe it was Dr. Lerner.
After you took these photographs, did you also retrieve that pad of paper that's depicted in 35D?
Yes, I did. It was collected and placed into the property evidence section.
Wagner, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification at states 36. Do you identify that, sir?
Yes, I can. Same as before, label on there with all the information that I put on there. Also the seals, with it being a plastic bag, we don't use the tape, we do heat seal. So it melts the plastic together, and then I do my initials, ID, and date on that seal itself. Do it in plastic in this case, that way you can see the information on it without having to go into it and open up later on if necessary.
Is that in the same condition as when you retrieved it from Mr. Bybee's trunk as part of the patrol car? Going to be forensic examination on his patrol car?
Yes, it is.
Runner, I'm offering State's Exhibit 36 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Objection having been heard, 36 is admitted, may be published if you wish.
Please open that up so that I can publish it.
Welcome.
What day did you conduct the examination of Mr. Bybee's patrol car?
May I double check my notes?
Yes, please, if it would help to refresh your recollection.
Patrol car was on February 2nd of 2017.
Thank you. Did you conduct any further forensic analysis in this case, or further investigation, I should say, in this case?
Yes, I did. On February 8th, we had the name of the company is
It's,
Kimley Horn.
yes.
Responded to the lab. They went, when they're in our secure facility, they have to be escorted. Anytime that doesn't work in that unit, it has to be escorted through our area. So I was with them while they were trying to do data extraction on the vehicles, King's truck and also Bybee's truck.
Right. Are you aware of what results they were able to obtain from data extraction on Troy King's black truck and or Mr. Bybee's black truck?
To my knowledge, they weren't able to obtain anything.
So they weren't able to locate any data from either vehicle?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Madam Clerk, can I verify whether 25A and B have been admitted?
Sorry, 35 A and B?
25.
20.
There's still boxes of gloves.
Boxes of gloves, 25 A, B, and C are all admitted.
Okay. Okay.
There should only be an A and a B.
A and B.
25 A and B.
I'm sorry, A and B.
Thank
My
you, sir.
mistake.
They're admitted?
They are admitted.
Okay.
I have nothing further from Mr. Wagner, thank you.
Gentlemen, cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Or morning.
Still morning. Feels like afternoon. You arrived at Miss Soul's residence on January 12th at 12:09.
Correct.
When you first arrived, are you told what the situation is?
Correct.
So is it before you walk in the door, you kind of have a lay of the land, or it's once you come in, you are debriefed about what the situation is?
Outside in front of the residence is when I'm debriefed, stating that we have a possible battery case and it involves
I didn't ask you what, I just asked.
Yes, outside.
Okay, and who did that?
Detective Gata and Sergeant Shurtleff.
So at the time you arrived, both of them were outside and gave you a rundown.
Correct.
Does that then help you decide what you're going to do?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Do you spend any time interviewing or talking to, in this case, Ms. Soul?
I did not.
You rely on the detectives to do that, and then they relay that to you.
Correct.
When you come into a residence as this one, do you make the decision of what you're processing, collecting as evidence, or are you told by the detectives where to go, what to do?
It's a combination of both. A lot of times we will go in and start working the scene based off of the information we have. If we see something that looks like it's relevant, we start going. But as you say, the detectives are interviewing people, so they get more information. Then they come in and say, hey, this is something that came up. This is something that we need done. So it's a combination of both.
Were you by yourself or with someone else?
I was there with my supervisor, Candace Matthews, and then also Detective Gata was also in the residence at the time.
Any other crime scene technician?
No.
Tell us the first thing you do when you walk in the door.
I start my photographing.
And I take it, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea was to try to photograph the entire residence.
Correct.
While you were there, and I think you told us 4.5 hours, is that fair?
Yes.
Were there interviews being conducted again of Ms. Soul?
Yes, there were.
Did you listen in, or were you busy doing your assignment?
I was busy doing my stuff, but there were pieces that I would overhear because we're in the same area.
All right. Were you told, Mr. Wagner, that when the allegation was that Mr. Bybee entered the residence that morning, correct? Sometime.
Correct.
Were you told that he entered the residence and he was not wearing any gloves?
I don't recall hearing that. I heard that he was wearing gloves. I don't recall hearing anything about him entering not wearing gloves.
Does that mean you processed the front door or you did not?
We did not.
There was an allegation that the vehicle that was found in the garage, and I'm assuming you took photographs, it was found in the garage and you were there, correct?
Correct.
It was not running when you were there, correct?
Correct.
Did you process the door from inside the house to the garage?
Yes, I did.
Great.
Yes, I did.
On the vehicle itself, there was a whole host of things that you processed, correct?
Correct.
Steering wheel, correct?
Correct.
The door handles, correct?
Yes.
The ignition column,
Yes.
well, you recall what else?
I believe the rear view mirror,
Yes, sir.
the passenger side doors also.
Yes, sir.
I swabbed the keys that were found out in by the kitchen door leading into the garage.
Yes, sir.
And I also did ES lifts, electrostatic lifts on the floor on the driver's side of the garage.
Can you help us out with that? What is that?
What it is if someone steps in an area, they may possibly leave shoe impressions behind. Being the surface of the garage, I wanted to do an ES lift there to see if I could get anything of value to come up, and didn't have any luck. There was some stuff that looked like little partials that came up, but nothing of evidentiary value where you could do a comparison on to eliminate or verify that it was a certain specific shoe.
Did you also do that inside the residence?
I did not.
Why not?
Based on the information I had at that time was that Bybee had been in the residence before. I didn't have any information that he had driven the car or been in the garage or anything. So that's why I focused on that area, being that I knew that he had been in the house before based on statements. There was no reason to try to get fingerprints and stuff like that in there because he's already been in there before.
Now, you did not take any photographs of these lifts in the garage, did you?
No, I did not.
All right. You took photographs of Miss Soul. We saw those.
Correct.
Close-ups, correct?
Correct.
If you got there at 12:09, what time do you think you took those photographs? Ballpark.
Probably, I would say probably sometime around 3 o'clock or so.
Why the delay? Just other things going on?
She was being interviewed at the time. I was trying to focus on the scene. I don't want to jump in and interrupt the interview that's going on.
Just so we get this out of the way, am I correct that you're the person, you're the forensic technician that was responsible for sending all the items that you collected in Miss Soul's house for DNA testing?
Correct.
You would be the one communicating with the DNA lab, the FDLE lab, requesting these items be tested
Correct.
for DNA.
Yes.
Fair to say that there is not one report, one notation that says Frank Bybee had DNA within Miss Soul's home, correct?
Correct.
All DNA analysis was negative related to Mr. Bybee, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk about some of the items. There were photographs that you took of wine glasses.
Yes.
Am I correct in my assumption that you were told that the wine glasses, for some reason, were relevant to this case?
Yes, it was.
Can you tell us where you found the wine glasses?
They were in the kitchen up in a cabinet.
And do you recall being told that the wine glasses had not been cleaned but had been returned to the cabinet?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
You recall
Yes, I believe that at one point I thought I heard that they were in the dishwasher, but then at another time I think they were said that not to have been washed and were just put up there.
that? Did you test those wine glasses, or swab, I think that's the correct phrase, correct? For
Correct.
DNA?
Can I double check my notes?
Absolutely.
I know I did fingerprints, but I do not recall
That's okay.
doing DNA. No, I did not swab them, only processed for fingerprints.
All right. Do you recall being informed that Mr. Bybee actually drank from some of those wine glasses?
Yes.
And yet, by him drinking from one of the wine glasses, presumption would be that he would leave DNA. Right?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Right?
Possibly, yes.
And yet, the only way to determine that would be to swab it.
Correct.
And yet, you did not do that.
Correct.
That would have at least given us an idea of whether he had actually drank from that wine glass, correct?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly. You processed a vermouth bottle, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you found that within the refrigerator, is that fair?
Yes, I did.
Refrigeration affect in any way fingerprints or DNA?
It can. It just depends on how the fingerprint is deposited, if it's oils on the skin or if it's some sort of contaminant that would fall off.
To be clear, did you process the vermouth bottle for fingerprints or DNA or both?
Fingerprints.
Were you also told that there was blood that was wiped up all around the blue chair, the recliner? You know what I'm talking
Yes.
about? As well as the rug area, correct?
Yes.
Now, you have to forgive me because I've only seen this on TV, but there is an ability to use a formula or a light that will illuminate the presence of blood.
Correct.
Even if somebody tries to clean it up,
Yes.
it still could be there. Did you do that in this case?
No, we did not.
Any indication that there was blood around the chair or any blood in this carpet area?
I noticed some blood in the grout of the tile,
Yes.
but no smears or anything like that of blood.
Okay. And nothing whatsoever on the carpet.
Correct. Not that I recall seeing.
You did process the medical bracelet. We saw that from yesterday, correct?
Yes, sir.
You did collect pills. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And I believe you referenced that you collected the diazepam pills.
Yes.
You also then swabbed for DNA the pill bottle itself
Correct.
and sent that in.
Yes.
When you are going through the scene and processing, when you move from one room to the next, you do anything different?
Typically, we are changing gloves whenever we're going to possibly handle something new for DNA.
I know typically you do.
Yes.
Did you in this case?
Yes.
So every time you touched a new item, you put on a new set of gloves.
No, only when we were concerned with DNA. So if I was doing something just for processing for fingerprints, then no, I don't change gloves every time. If it's something that I'm going to test for DNA, then yes, I change gloves every time.
Okay. So for example, you touched the wine glasses, correct?
Correct.
And then you would not have changed gloves when you went and touched something else.
If it wasn't for DNA, no.
And I take it that's because of a concern for what's called cross-contamination, is that right?
Correct.
Now, did you collect a pillow or a couple pillows in this case?
Yes, I did.
And what was the purpose of collecting those two pillows?
Because they matched the general description of what Miss Soul said that Bybee had used at the time of the incident.
And at least from your understanding was he grabbed the pillows, put them over her face, and attempted to smoke.
Correct.
So what were you looking for on the pillows?
Those were collected just for display to show that there was pillows there similar to what her description was on scene.
Well, certainly, if in fact those pillows were placed on her face in an attempt to suffocate, you could look for whether in fact her DNA's on there, right?
Correct.
You could look for the presence of blood, right?
Correct.
But you did neither.
Because she said those were not the pillows that were used, so there was no sense to do that.
Okay, so let's talk about where were the pillows that were used?
They were in an off room to the south of the living room, southmost wall on a chair.
And did you grab those pillows and process those for either blood or DNA?
Looked at them as I collected them, but no,
Why?
because she said they were not involved in the incident.
Didn't you just tell me that those were the pillows that were involved?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you find the pillows that were involved?
No, I did not.
Did she indicate what those pillows were and where they went?
She said that she thinks he may have taken them with her or with him. Said those were the same style that was used. She never said that those were the pillows that were used. I just collected them because of the fact of the resemblance from what she was stating was used.
Okay. You photographed, I believe, the blinds, both down and up.
Correct.
And the reason for that was you were told that Mr. Bybee had looked out those blinds according to the soul.
Correct.
Did you analyze those blinds for either fingerprints or DNA?
No, I did not.
You were told that Miss Soul, during her description of a struggle with Mr. Bybee, actually bit his hand. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you look at Mr. Bybee's hand?
Yes, when I collected buckle swabs from him.
And did you notice any indication of bite marks on Mr. Bybee's hands?
No, I did not.
There was a description by Miss Soul that Mr. Bybee grabbed a glass of water and brought it to her to hold. Did you process any water glass?
I don't recall hearing anything about a water glass.
Next to Miss Soul's blue recliner was an end table.
Correct.
On that end table was what's referred to as a turbis tumbler. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Process that.
No, I did not.
There was a description by Miss Soul that while she was being attacked, she was taking pills and dropping them in a glass of water. Did you analyze any glass for the presence of residue from pills?
No, I did not.
Miss Soul describes that she took a shower, but she still had blood on her hands and her fingernails, cuticles. I note there's no
Objection to the
photographs.
form of the question.
Ruled.
I note that there's no photographs whatsoever of the cuticles or the hands in the soul. Can you tell us why?
I did not take them that day. I don't know if another analyst went out and photographed her at a later date if they got photographs of her hand, but I did not.
Are you aware of other analysts going out and doing photographs?
Yes, at the hospital.
Okay. I'm talking about the house.
No, I did not.
Nobody asked you to photograph her hands, cuticles, blood on her hands.
No,
Did you see blood on her hands and cuticles?
I don't recall. I'd have to look back at the photos to see the overalls.
All right, so you took buccal swabs and you described for those to us what those are. Swabbing of the inside of the mouth of Miss Soul, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Bybee
Correct.
and Troy King.
Correct.
Anyone else?
No.
And you send those off to the DNA lab so that they have something to compare to.
Correct.
Now, when you send an item off to the DNA lab, is there forms that you fill out?
Yes, there is.
And those forms basically let the DNA lab know what it is you're looking for.
Correct.
Is it important for you not to suggest to them what to find?
When we send it, we're not giving them, we're trying to find this person on this item. We're telling what type of analysis we want. If it's going to be, we need analysis for touch DNA, we need analysis for blood, we need analysis for saliva. They have different ways that they do their analysis. So we give them that information so that they know what type of testing we're needing done.
Why don't you tell them we're looking for this person's DNA?
Because that can't think of the word that I want to use.
Could taint?
Persuade, contain, or taint the information. We try to leave it open for interpretation. That way you're only analyzing the data that's present.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Did you suggest to them what you needed in this case? Specifically saying we need to find Mr. Bybee's DNA on X?
No, I did not.
You sir?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, the next defense exhibit. L. Oh, how did we get there? Okay, may I approach?
Oh, certainly.
Sir, what can I show you what Mr. marked identification as defendant's exhibit L.
Okay.
L. You can turn to the tab section and read that to yourself. Are you there?
Yes.
You would agree with me that on this particular request for DNA analysis, you did exactly what you said you shouldn't do, right?
I said we should have we want to try to get the suspect swabs. I did not specify Bybee as trying to get his DNA.
Well, actually, right above that, you do define the suspect as Bybee, don't you?
Oh, yes, I did.
And then you say, we're trying to get the suspect's DNA.
Correct.
May I retreat?
You may.
You mentioned to Ms. Fravik that you had sent off for DNA analysis. I believe it was to the FDLE lab, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, the actual swabbing of the seal of the white envelope.
Correct.
And the white envelope was the envelope that contained 4 checks.
Correct.
Were any of the checks analyzed for DNA?
No, they were not.
Just fingerprinting, is that fair?
Correct.
But the actual swabbing of the seal, where allegedly somebody would lick it if it isn't self-adhesive,
Correct.
that's what you were looking for.
Correct.
No DNA connected to Mr. Bybee.
No.
You referenced for us the blue nightgown. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
And I believe you said there was no finding linking Mr. Bybee. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, so as they went through the analysis, you would have been given the findings by the DNA lab, correct?
Correct.
In other words, you as Mr. Wagner are responsible for sending it off to them, making the request. When they're completed with the analysis, they send it back to Mr. Wagner with their results.
Correct.
The white and brown dish towel that I believe you photographed for us, correct?
Correct.
That was analyzed to determine whether there was DNA from Mr. Bybee, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, he was excluded as a contributor, correct?
Correct.
As it relates to the nightgown, the blue nightgown, both the right sleeve and the left sleeve were analyzed. Is that fair?
Yes.
And according to the DNA lab, which was reported to you, I think you told us on the right sleeve there were a mixture of 5 individuals.
Yes, I don't remember if it was the right or left. I think it was the right.
Okay. But it was inconclusive for comparison purposes. I think
Correct.
that's what the phrase was.
Yes.
Fair?
Yes.
And then they analyzed the left sleeve, and they said that Mr. Bybee was excluded as a contributor for anything on that sleeve.
Correct.
Not everything that someone touches necessarily will produce a DNA analysis, correct?
Correct.
We've seen a whole host of gloves that you pulled out here. These are the gloves that every deputy in the Sarasota Sheriff's Department is given, correct?
Correct.
Everybody that has anything to do with evidence, collection of evidence, touching anything, they have those gloves.
Yes.
You use them on a daily basis.
Yes, I do.
There are times when someone can wear a glove and still produce DNA.
Yes.
There are times where someone can wear a glove and still produce a fingerprint.
Yes.
These gloves don't keep that from happening.
Right. They prevent it, but it is still possible.
Let's talk for a second about this notepad. Are you familiar with what the other case numbers are in this case?
No, I'm not.
So the case number up here, you're not aware of what that particular case number corresponds to?
No, just from the detective saying that he had responded to the residents before. But I don't know specifics about what had happened.
Wow. Did you inquire from anybody about what this means?
No, I did not.
Sure. Let's talk for a second, if we can, Mr. Wagner, about property receipts. When you collect an item, as you have in this particular case, you're required to, as you've showed us on a number of these exhibits, to put your, well, why don't you tell us, what are you required to put on an item when you collect it first?
When we package up the item, we have our barcode that we print out through our QTEL system, that is the electronic property system. It'll show the barcode number and my name on there if I'm the one that collected it, the date it was collected. We also, when we seal an item, we have either tape or a heat seal, and we would initial and ID and date it. There are some items, if they are large items that we can't put into a bag, then those we don't seal because there's no bag for us to seal.
The concept, the idea, so to speak, is so that anybody and everybody who touches an item of evidence can detail who touches it.
Correct.
Date, initials, time.
Correct.
So when you gather a piece of evidence, we should expect to see the date, time, initials of who collected it, correct?
Typically, yes. There are instances where, in this case, I believe one instance was the DVR system, where they wanted it to go to digital forensics. So I had entered it into the system. Digital forensics came and picked it up from me, so they did the final packaging on it because they were doing their analysis on it.
When was the DVR system retrieved from Mr. Bybee's house?
Can I double check my notes?
Please, if that's okay.
So you know the item number of that?
I might be able to do that for you. Give me 1 second here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I found it right here. That was collected on January 14th.
Item 17?
Yes.
Okay, we're on the same page here. Collected on the 14th?
Yes.
When was it placed into property?
That I'm not sure. That would be part of property's database. They keep track of chain of custody.
Well, when would you have retrieved it so it could be analyzed?
I didn't do the retrieval of the analyzing it.
On a property receipt, when you go and check an item out of property for it to be analyzed, do you have to sign it out?
Yes.
You have to put your initials and the date?
Yes, you do.
And if I showed you the property receipt that would reflect when you would have gone and checked that out with your initials, would that help you?
Yes.
You want me to approach?
May.
Show you what I'll mark as defendant's exhibit sorry, is in marriage. Take a look at this, base stamp 1278. And I know it's a little small, but read that to yourself and tell us that refreshes your recollection of when you would check that out.
Says January 15th, 2017.
That sound about right?
Yes. This is actually showing it was Brooke Bazell that checked that out, not me. My initials and date are theirs because I wrote the time down for her and I made a mistake on the time, so I was initialing and IDing my mistake here, but it was actually Brooke Bazell that checked it out.
Okay. So you are not the one who actually checked it out and gave it to her for analysis. She did it herself.
Correct. She came directly to the crime scene unit and picked it up from there. As one of the instances I was talking about where if they need to do a rush analysis on it, they will come get it from us before it physically going through property.
Maybe I missed this. Who was the individual that actually physically took the DVR from Mr. Bybee's house on the 14th?
I did.
And where did you take it to?
I took it to the crime scene unit, and then Brooke Bazell came there and picked it up from me there.
So it sat at crime scene unit for a day?
In our secure facility, yes.
You say secure facility?
It's alarmed. It has locks on the doors, locks in the...
And the access to that secure facility is by anyone and everyone who is law enforcement?
Wrong.
Sheriff's office?
Incorrect. Only people in the crime scene unit have access to that building.
So you took it there.
Correct.
Is there a reason you didn't put it into property?
Because I had several other items in this case, some which are being processed. So typically when we go out to a scene, we have a large number of items. We take them there, we do our processing, and then they go to property.
In this particular situation, that's what happened with the DVR, is it sat for a day, and then are you saying that Ms. Bazell then came there and picked it up?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
You told me that you did not process the front door.
Correct.
apologize, Your Honor. May I approach?
You may.
Where I'm showing you a mark for identification as defendant's exhibit Mary, or no, Nancy, N, 2606.
Okay.
If you look at the bottom paragraph, highlighted section, please read that to yourself. Let me know when you're done.
Okay.
After reading that, is your memory refreshed of whether you in fact did process the front door for prints?
Those are referring to the front doors of the car,
Okay,
not of the residence.
all right. So in that particular the front driver's door,
I did front driver and front passenger.
did you do the back?
No, I did not.
Okay. So when it says I processed the front doors, that has to do with the vehicle, not the actual house.
Correct.
Thank you for clarification.
Not a problem.
You showed us photographs of the computer,
Yes.
and I believe you processed and photographed the computer. Is that correct?
I just photographed it. I didn't process it, I don't believe.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you know whether the computer was processed at all for prints or DNA?
Not to my knowledge, it was not.
Do you know why that is?
Didn't feel that that was important at the time.
Were you advised as part of this investigation that one of the allegations were that Mr. Bybee had used that computer
At a later time.
at a later time?
Yes, not the initial time when I collected the computer.
Okay. As part of your collection of evidentiary items at the home of Miss Soul, you collected 4 books of checks as well as carbon copies. Is that correct?
Correct.
At any time while you were reviewing items to collect in Miss Soul's residence, did you find any checks that were actually signed by Miss Soul? If you recall.
I know one of the carbon copies has a signature spot on it.
Correct.
I don't recall any other checks in the residence already being signed.
All right. Were you the one who actually went and met with Miss Soul for the purpose of collecting what's called the handwriting exemplars?
No, I did not.
Someone else within your unit did that?
Detective Gata did.
Is that something that typically you do?
No.
I may have a moment here.
Okay.
Ask you this, the vermouth bottle that you processed,
Yes.
I think you said you processed it for prints and not DNA?
Well, I didn't process it for DNA as far as drinking it, and I meant to correct myself. I did. There was an area of a smudge after I processed for prints. I did swab that area for touch DNA, and that was sent off to the lab.
And it came back, no connection to Mr. Biden?
Correct.
When you are processing an item, can you do both processing for DNA and fingerprints, or is it exclusive?
It's as long as you know ahead of time that that's your plan, you can do it both.
Yes, sir.
In this particular case, I use what's considered a single-use powder and brush. So it's a brand new packet of powder, brand new brush, hasn't been used on any other scene or any other items. That way you don't have to worry about any contamination from other cases. So in this case, because I did use a single-use powder and brush, I was able to then swab the smudge area for DNA.
It may seem rather trivial, but in order to get into the refrigerator, you had to open the door. Fair?
Correct.
Any swabbings or DNA analysis done on the door handles of
No.
the refrigerator? How about on the handles for the cabinets where the wine glasses were
No, they were not.
found? That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Redirect.
Mr. Wagner, why do you wear those blue gloves?
To protect ourselves from contaminants at scenes, blood. It's also to do our best to eliminate any altering of evidence. When we do handle items, we try to make sure that we're handling somewhere that wouldn't destroy fingerprints or DNA on the item. So if I'm grabbing an item, I may try to grab it from somewhere like this that I don't think would be handled often in order to avoid damaging anything.
Do you also wear those blue gloves because you don't want to leave your fingerprints behind at a crime scene?
Correct.
And do you wear those blue gloves because you don't want to leave your touch DNA behind at a crime scene?
Correct.
Or leave behind your liquid DNA, blood, saliva, anything else at a crime scene?
Correct.
All right. So, were you briefed that Bybee was in Ms. Soul's house on multiple occasions before you were called out on January 12th?
Yes, I was.
And despite the fact that he had been at her house on multiple occasions before the 12th, did you find his DNA evidence in that house?
Did not.
Were you briefed that Bybee had driven Ms. Soul's car on at least several occasions before January the 12th?
At a later date, I was, not on that original occurrence.
All right, but were you briefed that Bybee had driven Ms. Soul's car on at least several occasions?
Yes, I was.
Did you find his prints or his touch DNA in that car, despite the fact that he had been in that car more than once?
No, I did not.
If one opened the door of a refrigerator wearing those blue gloves that you showed us, would that impair your ability to find fingerprints or touch DNA?
It could, yes.
Would it impair your ability if you use blue gloves to open cabinets?
It could, yes.
Would it impair your ability to leave behind touch DNA or prints on car doors?
It could, yes.
Or anything for that matter?
Yes.
When items are either in property or at the forensic facility, are those both secure facilities?
Yes, they are.
And do law enforcement come and go to check out property at will or touch property or examine it?
No, they do not. If they come into our area, they have to sign in and be escorted throughout the entire time.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Subject to recall?
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
you are subject to recall, so you're not excused from your subpoena yet, but you will be contacted if you are needed. Please don't discuss the testimony with any other potential witnesses in this case until it's resolved.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I see the attorney is at sidebar for a second, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take one, as we did the other day, we're going to take one defense witness out of order. It's a nurse that needs to get back to work. So we're going to take her before we take our lunch break. Hopefully we can get her done and just, I'm informed that she's just going to be very brief. So we're going to do that before we take our lunch break, okay? Mr. Lakin, would you like to call your defense witness?
Yes, Moni Wilson.
Ms. Wilson, please.
Moni Wilson.
Come up here with me. Thank you.
You may inquire, Mr. Lakin.
1 minute. Good morning.
Hello,
Ma'am, can you just state your name for the record?
Kiamani Wilson.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, what do you do for a living?
I'm a registered nurse at Sarasota Memorial.
Okay. In what area do you work in?
Oh, in the ER.
Mainly in the ER? Can you just speak up a little bit, because this nice lady's taking everything down and the jury needs to hear from you.
Okay.
And how many years have you been working as a nurse?
5.
5 years. Can you give me a brief information about your educational background?
Let's see, I have a bachelor's degree from State College of Florida in nursing, a bachelor's degree from South Carolina State University in criminal justice.
Okay. And in your capacity as a nurse, you work with patients that come into the emergency room?
Yes.
Okay. Just to move things along, I'm calling your attention to January of this year. Do you recall a patient named Marsha Soul being at the facility?
No.
You don't have an independent recollection of that?
No.
Okay. You've had an opportunity to look at some documents today?
Yes.
Does that refresh your memory?
Well, my name is on the document, so.
Can I approach one?
You may.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. There's no evidence that this has refreshed Ms. Wilson's memory.
It was shown to her. Do you have any questions at this point rather than referring
I do have a
directly to the
question,
notes?
Your Honor.
All right.
Thank
So ask the questions.
Your Honor, I'm
No.
objecting.
Whoa.
You've reviewed these records.
Yes.
You reviewed them before you came in the courtroom,
Yes.
and that's refreshed your memory?
My name is on the document, so based on what's on the document, I had to have done it
Could you explain to me how you have done that?
because my electronic signature is on it. It says Kiamani Wilson.
And explain how that system works. How does that happen?
So at Sarasota Memorial, we have a system where we have to type in our username and an independent login for verification.
Okay. And then you list information,
Then we chart based on our username.
right? And this is the information that's listed in the report?
Yes.
Can you prepare this report?
Yes, my name is on
This
that
is evidence in
document.
this case. Yes. All right. Can I show the document, please?
Show her the document, or you wish?
I've already shown it to Marcia, to aid the jury.
All right. Come here for a second.
Is this, by reviewing Exhibit P and Exhibit JJ, the defense exhibits, does that refresh your memory of what took place?
Like I said, it was me that completed the document. We complete the same document on many patients. So, but because my signature is on it, I know it was me that completed that document.
Let me just ask you a question, ma'am. Could you, out of your own memory, independent memory, testify as to anything that's on those forms right now?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
All right, so I mean, if he asked you a question about what's on that form, could you remember that from your own present memory? Or would you have to look at the form to be able to testify about what's on that form?
I may have to look at the form.
Okay.
And so you have no personal independent recollection,
No,
other than that your signature's on and you believe you created the document.
right.
Commissioner, thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to ask you about Exhibit P versus fall risk. What does that mean?
It's a scale that we complete on each patient to give us it's a quick assessment to tell us if the patient is a high risk or low risk for falls.
Okay, and you have a system, and it's called the Morse fall scale. How does that work?
So based on certain categories in the fall scale, you're assigned points. And those points let us know the risk level.
Okay. And what is the Morse fall scale system? How does that work in terms of the numbers? Do you know?
I believe if the number is greater than 50 or 51, you're considered a high risk for falls.
Okay. What was your score on this document?
60.
And that's high.
Yes.
Was that a 6-0, ma'am?
Yes, 60.
What does that tell you as an experienced nurse?
That the patient should have side rails up, be placed close to the nursing station, have assistance when getting out of bed
Because of the ability of frequent
because of the
falls?
probability of a fall, yes.
Okay. And the Morse and Exhibit JJ, is the criteria that you use for that.
Objection leading.
Is there a criteria that's listed?
Mr. Lake, come here. Take that off. Take it.
Ma'am. Okay, on the Morse fall scale system, how does that work? What's the criteria for that?
So like I said, there are categories. Do you have a history of fall?
How many?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
It's 6 for fresh in memory?
It sounds about right.
Okay, and you use that criteria to score someone, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, and you did that in this case?
Yes.
And what was the score?
60.
And that would be high?
Yes.
Very high.
High, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing else.
Cross?
No thanks.
No cross? Thank you.
No,
Mr.
no cross.
No cross. Ms. Wilson, you may step down, ma'am. Any subject to recall?
No.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. You are excused from your subpoena, ma'am, so you can go about your day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is I'm going to turn it back to the prosecution for a moment.
Your Honor, the state has no further witnesses in this case in chief. At this time, the state will rest its case.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the state has rested its case. So at this stage, I'm going to, you've heard all of the witnesses that the state intends to bring forward in its case in chief. I am going to discharge you at this point for lunch. And I'm going to do some legal stuff here with the attorneys outside of your presence. So I'm trying to think, why don't we figure on being back here at probably 1:30, maybe 1:40, because we're going to probably take 15 or 20 minutes of our time. So why don't we just figure around 1:30, 20 minutes of 2, we'll start with the defense's case. All right? Thank you. All right, you're seated. Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. All right, the record will reflect the jury has left the room, is not present at this time. And Mr. Kapir, do you wish to make a motion for judgment of acquittal on any of the counts present?
Yes, Your Honor, and as I represented to the court yesterday, I would do that for the record.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm in a little bit of a quandary because at least some of the case law suggests that I need to make a detailed analysis, but as I said to the court yesterday, I'm not going to do that. I would make that for the record and stand on what the court has heard.
All right. Well, any comment, or just allow the court to make its ruling at this time, Ms. Bradley?
I will allow the court to make its ruling at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. The record will reflect that the court has reviewed the operative information in this case, has reviewed all of the counts that have been filed against the defendant. The court has also had the opportunity to review the jury instructions which have been promulgated by the Supreme Court, covering the charges which have been filed, has reviewed all of the elements necessary to establish a prima facie case for each of those charged crimes, and has heard the testimony of the state's witnesses, and has reviewed the evidence admitted in this case. Having done so, this court finds that the state has presented competent evidence which, when viewed in a light most favorable to the state, as I must, has established each element of the crimes charged. Therefore, the defendant's motion for judgment of acquittal is denied at this time. Any other issues we want to bring up at this time?
No, Your Honor, I believe, thanks to the state, we have a whole host of folks ready to go.
All right.
Whenever you tell us to be back.
1:30, I think, that gives us an hour and 15 minutes for our lunch break and gives you a few minutes to talk to your witnesses if that's what you desire to do.
Yes, sir.
What I would like to do at this time is just have counsel forward, please, and have a discussion off sidebar. You all at 1:30.
All right. We're in recess till 1:30.
I'm going to make a suggestion as well, ladies and gentlemen. I would like, give me a little premiere of what it is we think we're doing with the defense. Where are we going to be as of tomorrow?
Your Honor, if we can roll along, there's a good chance that we could wrap up today,
All right.
or maybe first thing in the morning.
What I'm going to propose is 8:30 tomorrow morning. Why don't we plan on convening at 8:30 to do our charge conference at 8:30 tomorrow morning before the jury comes in at 9. All right, so
Sounds
everybody
good.
will have the opportunity
Yes.
to go over those jury instructions, and we can do our charge conference tomorrow morning.
One quick question.
Sure.
Ask the court's procedure with respect to reading the instructions.
I'm going to read the instructions before closings, as you do in here in Sarasota. All right? Which I may develop as a practice down in Charlotte County when I get done. It seems to make an awful lot of sense to me. So, all right? So I will see you all at 1:30. I'll be available if anybody has any questions.